Smooth 98.1. Here we are, gone past 7:30 for a Friday morning. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth Breakfast. I'm Sope Martins, and I have got Ikemesit Effiong, my favorite analyst, in. Don't tell anybody else I said that, Ikemesit.
Tell them. I want them to know.
Good morning, Ikemesit. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Fantastic. Always a pleasure to have you on Freshly Pressed to analyze the news for us and with us. All right, so speaking about with us, make sure you join this conversation. WhatsApp, send your messages in on that platform to 0809 444 981. Send your tweets in as well. We are at Smooth981FM up on Twitter. Ikemesit Effiong is at Judge Ike. And you can use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. And of course, we're streaming live up on youtube.com/Smooth981FM Lagos. Make sure you go over there, catch what's going on behind the scenes, and also join the conversation on the live chat. There are different ways to get your questions, your analysis in here. All right, so for Freshly Pressed, we're going to start off with a reaction. This coming in from the Premium Times. Nigeria's military chief denies reports of forced abortion on thousands of women. Lucky Urabo, Army General, Chief of Defense Staff, spoke at the weekly media briefing organized by the Presidential Communications Team at the Presidential Villa in Abuja. And some of the words he used in reaction to the report by Reuters, which had alleged that had made some allegations that over 10,000 forced abortions were carried out by the army on victims of Boko Haram and ISWAP terrorists. Well, he used outright nonsense, saying it's not true, that's outright nonsense, and also said that he never saw anything like that from Maiduguri down to Mamala Mari cantonment where he lived. And he said that he will basically that they're not going to follow up on it. There's no credence whatsoever to this. Ikemesit, what would you say to that response?
Honestly, I just want to sigh and just have us move on. But we are potentially talking about tens of thousands of lives. At the very least, Reuters is able to verify 10,000 women that were affected by this program. I honestly think that the allegations are grave enough that the military should have replied more substantively. I think to this, for the story, only the former commander of 7th Division, which is the division that was created specifically to tackle Boko Haram in 2013 and is based in Maiduguri. That was the only person that officially spoke on the record. Every other person didn't respond to comments, or when they did, they just outrightly denied it, from the former president's office to the presidency, defense headquarters, the military, as well as the current command structure within the division. There are two things, though, that Lucky Urabo said at this weekly media briefing that I want to hang on. So this is a direct quote. He said, So we think that the media changing the narrative, helping to bring that awareness to the people, will enable us to be more potent in our actions. He was soliciting for the media to be more supportive of the military's causes. Mm-hmm. But then he said this: if there are areas that we have crossed the line, it is necessary for you to bring that to our notice and we will address it. Well, the media just did that with the story. And what are you going to do about it? You said you're not going to dignify to the response. You're not going to investigate. These are serious allegations. Already, we have our international partners, the US and the UK, say they're going to be seeking for more information. They provide us with intelligence support. The US has a forward operating base in Difa region in Niger, which shares a border with Borno and Yobe, right? And they provide satellite coverage. They have helped in terms of weaponry. It probably is the case that, pressure from our international partners might be what will get the military to reckon with this. But honestly, my hopes are not particularly up or particularly high that this will happen. And I just want to, this is the argument, right, that I want to put forward to our lists. When you are dealing with the state is inherently more powerful than any individual. Oftentimes, it is more powerful than a collective of individuals, right? And structures, people who are appointed, people who are in positions, people who run agencies, people who run organizations like the army, right, are an inherent part of the state. And oftentimes their actions are often anonymized because of the fact that they are embedded within state structures. So it's often very hard to pinpoint responsibility. This program ostensibly started under the last administration. If we wanted to determine culpability or responsibility, where do we start? Do we start with the president, who is commander-in-chief? Do we start with the chief of defense staff, who is supposed to coordinate military the activities of all of the armed services? Do we start with the chief of army staff? Do we start with the commander of 7 divisions? Where do we start? So this is the problem with trying to determine state responsibility for things that have been done in our name. And let's be clear, this was done with the aim of furthering the security of Nigerians. If we want to ask questions, where do we start? That's always the concern for me. And so this is why we have institutional safeguards. We have, lawmakers, the House of Representatives and the Senate, to constantly ask questions. We have the judiciary and the courts, or in this case, military tribunals, in order to keep people honest. Because if you allow the states to get away with anything and everything, then there's no red line. Today, it's about, I'm coming. I'll wrap up a final sentence. Today, the line is we need to eliminate the offspring or the potential offspring of terrorists. Who knows what the line will be tomorrow, right? And you can find any arguments to use to justify any state-backed behavior. So this should concern us. We shouldn't just wave this away and say, okay, we are fighting a war, and this is just one of the necessary parts of fighting a war. We need to ask questions. It is important to ask these questions.
So I kind of said two things. First of all, looking at the history of military behavior and extrajudicial killings, in which we have seen hundreds and thousands of people of lives lost, citizens within our borders, lives lost at the hands of the military. Isn't this just and nothing was seen to be done? We saw the military playbook of, okay, come out, deny, we didn't do it. Where are the bodies? What are you talking about? Isn't this just more of the same playbook, first of all? And then second of all, you've talked about we need to ask these questions. We need to do these things, being we the people. What would you say about the public response to this news coming out that you've seen?
All right. So yeah. So to your first question, you're absolutely right. This is more of the same of that type of behavior, and it was because we didn't demand accountability with those things. We didn't necessarily demand accountability for the intelligence and the military failures that led to Chibok and Dapchi and Ankara and Kagara and all of these places where mass abductions have happened. We didn't demand accountability for Ran, where the Air Force, right, reportedly bombed civilians, as well as in other incidents where that has happened. That is the slippery slope that has led us to this. If security managers know that there will be hard questions, there would be consequences, and there would be responsibility that will be allocated personally to the people that we have asked to manage these situations for failures in the course of doing their work, then it would have been very hard for anyone to justify this kind of program. But the fact that they've gotten away with that, and they could potentially get away with this, was the linchpin that led them to greenlight this program. And it's been going on for what? 9 years. We only found out about this for 9 years. What about the other programs we don't know about? What about programs that we actually know some? We have some idea of what's going on, but we don't understand the full extent because the state would always say they don't want to disclose and talk about this in the interest of national security. National security is such an important line marker, but it's also a very fragile and potentially consequential one, that we can't allow everything just go in the name of national security. National security must also be policed and rigorously guarded. As to the reaction to this story, there are lots of people who think the military is justified. I listened into the show yesterday. I've sampled opinions within my circle. As it so happened, as this story was breaking, I was talking with some military stakeholders around a de-radicalization program for Boko Haram terrorists who want to defect and get out of that life and get reintegrated into society. This is a program that is known, that the media has reported on, that in my line of work, I thought I had studied extensively, but there were many things I didn't know about the program that I heard for the first time on Tuesday. So squaring it up with reading this particular story, I'm not particularly surprised at the public's reaction, but that's why I'm making the argument that we shouldn't accept everything that's done in our name, because a time will come when something which is unacceptable to you, but is probably acceptable to another constituency, will happen, and these same arguments will be used against you and your constituency. And the question is going to be, how are you going to feel about it? How are you going to feel? If the question I posed to my colleagues when we were debating this yesterday was, if the insurgency wasn't in the northeast, but it was in the south, or it was in the southwest, and we found out that this was happening, how do you think southwestern Nigerians or south Nigerians will react? And I'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. All right, Dami from Ikorodu, to be frank, senior military officers should stop talking to the press. An organization that continues to deny what happened on Instagram Live can't be trusted to be truthful when accused of breaking multiple laws of war. Again, he puts. By the way, can we now have a conversation about ending the hypocritical ban on abortions? Dami asks. This one in from Dr. I at CMS says, hundreds of Shiite Muslims were murdered in Kaduna by the military in the first term of Buhari's rule. Who has been sanctioned? I do not see any positive outcome to this horrible incident. We are losing our humanity. Yinka Bolu says, all of a sudden there's reduced news of Boko Haram attacks, and boom, Reuters comes up with this. The society is not even moved by it, so let's not flog it unnecessarily. Rather, let's ask that it should be investigated. But Ikemesit, you know how society takes the offspring of rape, he says. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we will be back with more. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth Breakfast. All right, so I'm going to YouTubers, I'll be reading your messages once we get back from the break. Let me actually get YouTube sorted.
Oh, okay. We're not live streaming on YouTube yet?
We are live streaming. I'm speaking to YouTube right now.
Oh, I see.
Let me just confirm that I can get the... Okay, where's our channel? There we go. All right, we are back. All right, and we are back with more. It is Freshly Pressed on Smooth Breakfast. This message in from D from Alausa says the Nigerian army is known for brutality, but not sex crimes. Let's give the benefit of the doubt to the Nigerian army. The intention of the sponsors of the news may be to dampen foreign military support. However, it ought to be investigated to clear any doubt. All right, from the Nation now. House of Representatives orders CBN to suspend new cash withdrawal limits. They've asked the Central Bank of Nigeria to halt the implementation of this new policy that's slated for January 9th next year, so in a few weeks. This is pending compliance with the provisions of the act establishing the bank. They've also summoned the CBN governor to brief the chamber on several policies of the banks in recent times. It seems like they were not too happy with what the CBN came out with.
Yes, indeed. So, the behavior of the House of Representatives was made pursuant to a motion that was sponsored by a lawmaker from Jigawa, and his argument, which was evidently and eminently reasonable, is that small businesses are the drivers of Nigeria's economy. That's true. The vast majority of Nigerian businesses, right, have a staff strength under 20. And most of these business owners transact their trade, businesses, and also fulfill transactions in cash. And this set of small and medium scale enterprises would be seriously negatively affected, at least in the short term, right? And they'll be really impacted by these new cash withdrawal limit directives, right? And so the motion was passed. To be clear, the National Assembly wasn't unanimous about this. The minority leader, Ndudi Elumelu, actually spoke against the motion and said the policy was fine and that it would help tackle insecurity, and maybe an extension of the implementation period would be the best course of action. Godwin Emefiele, for his own part, the CBN governor, was in Daura, Katsina to talk to the president about all that the CBN has been up to in recent times. And he told journalists yesterday that the CBN was open to reviewing the withdrawal limits, right, once it has done performance reviews, but that the CBN was not going back on this. Pause. The CBN was made pursuant to an act of the National Assembly. If the National Assembly has serious concerns, the CBN is supposed to be nominally independent, but if the National Assembly has serious concerns about what the CBN or any other agency or organ of government is doing, they have the right to ask questions. Historically, the CBN has not been very cooperative in appearing before the National Assembly. And I doubt, I'll need to, my preliminary checks are that apart from his confirmation and his reconfirmation, Emefiele has hardly appeared, if ever, right, before either the Senate or the House of Representatives. So my hopes are not really up that Murphy would actually come and talk to lawmakers about this. I wish he would, and I honestly think that this policy needs to be rethought. There are less painful ways for nudging and encouraging Nigerians to adopt less cash and to use more electronic transactions. For one, we need to fix how electronic transactions are being settled in this country. The fail rates and the transaction incompletion rates is abhorrently high, right?
Thank you, Ikemesit. So here is a question that, for me, so we have seen that electronic transactions have been going up in volume, and we need to ask the underlying reason why we have not seen more increase in the volumes, as opposed to, I would assume that wouldn't we ask about what is hampering the widespread or even more widespread use of electronic transactions, as opposed to carry out what feels rather like a punitive measure on the Nigerian populace.
Completely agreed. And those questions need to be asked. I think that the questions have been asked. I just think that the answers that have been proffered so far have not been very good, right? For starters, what's the number? Is it 38% of Nigerians are not financially included, so don't have a bank account, have very minimal contact with the formal financial system. Solutions need to be evolved for them. Cash withdrawal limits do not incentivize those people to go get bank accounts. If anything, they incentivize them to continue to do things the way they have always done them, right? That's the first part. For the Nigerians who are financially included, have bank accounts, use POS terminals, use USSD channel with the short codes and all of that stuff. You are incentivizing those people to actually step out of the formal financial system back into the informal. And so it's like, to my mind, I've listened to a lot of financial analysts talk about the pros of this in terms of how we will not, first and foremost, we will not need to make more banknotes. We will not need to, the cost of managing old cash notes would be reduced, and all of that. But I'm like, the cons outweigh those pros. And there are other ways, and there are better ways of incentivizing people, right? Because you're absolutely right. Year on year, POS transactions, most of the cash withdrawals anyway, but also instant payments, NEFT transactions, all of those have been going up on year, and I have those numbers, so I know they're some numbers, except for during COVID, right, where there was a slight dip. They have been growing year on year since 2013. So what is that we are doing well to encourage more e-transactions, and we continue to incentivize, right? Instead of going by using this track. Regulation does not always have to be punitive for regulators to feel that they are regulating. And I feel like Nigerian regulators go for the punitive first without considering all of the other carrots that could have been used to incentivize compliance on the part of people. This is a stressed economy. Nigerians are on almost record levels. Wages are barely growing. Food inflation is at record, or at least at highs not since the 1990s. This is not the time to do this. It does not make sense to do this right now. Again, while it's a Friday, so let's just keep it. Let's be nice and clean.
Speaking of Friday, Vanguard newspaper, fuel scarcity. DSS gives dealers 48 hours to stop scarcity or face the federal government's wrath. Ikemesit, your thoughts?
I don't know why the DS is I don't know why the DSS is involved in the conversation. That's worrying for a number of levels. And this brings me back to my thoughts around national security when we were discussing the abortion program, right, in the Northeast. You can say anything is being done in the name of national security, and Nigerians need to get.
Oh, Ikemesit, it looks like we have a slight technical issue. Well, whilst we get him back on, we will go through the messages. So this one hold on, from, there might be a technical, give me 1 second. All right, so Edward from Ikeja says that regarding the reports from Reuters and the response to it, Edward says that it was something that may have been done from, hold on, looks like I've lost that one. Let me try again. Okay, Kazim says, we all know such news regarding the Reuters reports cannot be addressed exhaustively in a 13-minute program. It's just too sensitive and multifaceted, but kudos to Ikemesit for trying. The next one comes in from Deji, who says, can we sue because the failed transactions can actually cost lives depending on the situation, maybe medically, or we just accept and move on as usual? Now, Lara from Oleki says, have you noticed that large supermarkets still have at a maximum one till that is card only? Even they don't want to deal with failed POS transactions. And Dami from Ikeja says, I went to a certain bank last week to set up both internet banking and get a debit card. It cost me almost 2,000 naira to set it up. While there, I met 2 customers yelling about months of months with unsolved transactions. They want to bring those fights into the streets. And more messages. This one from Yinka Bolu. He says, yes, we know transactions fail and we need to do better. But on this, the CBN governor is spot on. There's mobile money to address such rural area inclusivity. Kenya did it. Why can't we? We're accusing the CBN for not stepping up. Why can't we also step up? Interesting. And he goes on to say, how does Ikemesit feel when you see all this money misroad throwing wads of cash at each other during Owambes? We must be responsible, even if it is by force. Edward from Ikeja says the army, okay, says what the army did was in the interest of all. My mom is from the north and I totally agree. However, the method used may not have been the best. It's not every topic raised by Western media that is made with good intent. So are you debating the truth? So you're not debating the truth of it, you're just debating why is it even a story in the media at all? That's an interesting point of view. And Victor Schoen says, this CBN cashless policy will be in place till after the election. Thereafter, it would be relaxed. Oh, would it? Okay, that's an interesting one. Let me see if I can get Ikemesit back to talk about the DSS and the petrol story. 48 hours, people, 48 hours. Ikemesit, are you there? All right, there you are. So Ikemesit, we were in the middle of an analysis and then we did not get to the end of it. So let's get back into it. Oh, Ikemesit, why can't I hear you? This is an interesting one. People, it's like technology is trying to let us down this morning. Let me try again. All right, Ikemesit, say something for me. All right, people, it's looking like technology is trying to end the show early, but no, I'm just going to take it to the messages. All right, so let's see what we can do. So what I will do, actually, I know what I'll do. Give me 1 second. I'll get Ikemesit in the, yeah. All right, so I will read some more messages. Let me just take this one from Victor Schill, who says Boko Haram was an existential threat. It was clear the Nigerian state security apparatus was stretched to its limits and would possibly do the unexpected and unethical things. A lot was sacrificed for us to get to where we are now. So this would not be close to using a nuclear weapon or phosphorus bomb. Victor Schill, I'm okay, that's such a comparison. Chibuke says cashless policies fail because it's getting harder to trust that your funds are safe in banks. Last week, I suffered a significant debt that made no sense. It is still supposedly being investigated by the bank's fraud unit. It goes on to say, I was robbed and it's one of the big five. Okay. And I think on that note, I'm actually going to end the show. Ikemesit, we've tried, but what can we do? It's been an interesting one. Freshly Pressed is over. If you're on YouTube, you can see Ikemesit waving goodbye and then putting his head in his hands, but it's all good. Ikemesit, have a fantastic weekend.